I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar. We're having a conversation today about talking to your kids about multiple sclerosis. Your presenters are Catherine Smith. She lives over the fence from me at work. She's the MS Social Work Advisor at MS. And Sue Egan is also a colleague, and she is the NDIS Support Coordinator, and she is a parent living with multiple sclerosis. So we have some very valuable insight today, and we look forward to your participation. And my name is Catherine Keenan. We always start all our webinars with an acknowledgement to country. We acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians, past and present, on whose land we meet today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country, and respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. And now for the best part, I'd like to introduce our presenters. We have Catherine, also known as Cat Smith. Cat is one of our 2 social work advisors in the MS Connect team. She has been with MS for the past 3 years. Prior to this, Cat worked for another neurological peak body organisation where her passion for living well with a chronic condition grew. Cat also is busy with 2 small children of her own and is just at the beginning of her journey of being asked tricky questions and needing to explain more complex ideas. And our other guest we have in the studio today is Sue Egan. Sue has worked for MSL, that's Multiple Sclerosis Limited, for 9 years in a variety of roles, including Multiple Sclerosis Advisory Council, the Readathon Program, Bequests, Community Visitor Scheme, Corporate, MS Connect, and is now part of the NDIS working team as a support coordinator. Sue herself has had MS for 15 years and she has 3 children, all of whom are now young adults. So we're looking really forward to some good discussion, and we love to have your feedback and results. So before further ado, I'm just going to pop you to there, and I'm just going to pop the webcam on, and Sue and Kat can say hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
So we're just giving you a little quick wave and a smile to show you that we are real people. We're friendly folks, so we hope that you do feel free and feel comfortable asking questions of us today. And we hope that you get a lot of value out of the presentation. Because we're both self-conscious, we are very grateful to turn off the camera. But know that we are real people and we're still here, and we hope it's a great presentation today.
And do feel free to ask any questions, because we want to be honest and we want to help you. So yeah, go mad, ask questions.
Fantastic. So we'll switch it off now and we'll get started.
Be careful what you wish for, Sue.
So I want to say a quick thank you to Catherine for the lovely introduction. This is actually the 3rd time this topic has been presented. It came about from a project from some occupational therapy master's students, and they were the ones who provided the initial research and content for this webinar. I'm particularly grateful to have Sue here with us today. Sue has had the conversations with her kids about MS, and I know that I always take a lot away from hearing about her personal perspective. But just to start off with a few things before we hear a bit more from her. And let me just get this going. Okay. We want to acknowledge that the onset and progression of MS is unpredictable, and no 2 individuals are impacted in exactly the same way. So this can make understanding and coping with the diagnosis difficult and hard to anticipate for any person with MS and their families. Now, the onset of MS is usually in those years when a person is most likely to be a parent of dependent children. So you're not alone, and we'll talk about that throughout the presentation as well. Everyone's journey is different, and so too are all families. So in our little picture here, we have, the traditional Anglo family, mum, dad, 3 well-dressed kids in the picture. That might be your family, and great if it is, but there's a fairly good chance that it's not either. So we're keeping our information quite general so that you can adapt it to suit your particular family makeup, ages, cultural values, etc. In our presentation today, we're going to generally refer to mum and dad as having the diagnosis of MS, but it might be an auntie or uncle in your family, or a grandparent, or a family friend who is living with MS. And, you know, in that case, it's still really great information and language to be able to help talk to your kids about MS, regardless of who's living with the condition. I think the main thing you're going to take away from today is that there's no hard and fast rules. Everyone will do it differently. So what we're going to do is talk about a few suggestions to help make it easier and hopefully give you a bit more confidence. Our goal is to keep it quite practical. So when it comes to talking to your kids about your MS, the decision about when and how to do it is yours and yours alone. So to start off with, what we want to do is make sure that we haven't bored you off to eBay already and run a quick poll. And in this poll, we're going to ask you about what ages your children are. So you can select more than one answer, and it'll just give us a good idea about sort of who's listening in today and whether it's younger kids or older kids that you have.
Thank you, Kat. I'll just launch that. And what you'll see on the screen is you'll see the question, and then you can select as many answers as you wish, as Kat said, and then the answers will come back to me. So I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. So we'll just launch that. So you should be able to see that onto your screen. And it says, how old are your children? Please select all that apply. You may have toddler and preschools. You may have primary school age children between 5 and 12. You may have secondary school children 12 to 18, or you may have adult children, or you might have a whole combination of a blended family. So please tick what you would like to do, and we will just wait for some more to come in. We've got 83% of voters, so I'll just wait a little bit more time and see what we get from that. Anyone who would like to do a final click, that would be great. Okay, so I'll close that off now, and I will share with a poll with you. So basically, I'll share on the screen, might be more helpful. There we go. So the poll results are showing there. We've got, so Kat and Sue, we've got 40% of people who are listening today have got primary school age children between 5 and 12. Another large number have got adult children, 40%. So there's a big share there, and 20% of toddler and preschool. And maybe or maybe not lucky, there's no secondary school 12 to 18. I know what that age group's like, I'm right in the thick of that. So that's what the listeners are today, 20% toddlers, 40% primary school, and 40% adult. So thank you very much for providing that to us all, and we've now got a bit more of an idea of who's listening today.
And that's really good to know, because I think a lot of the information, you know, is about having those conversations for the primary school and younger children. But, you know, at the end of the day, they're all going to grow up, and we're going to talk about the evolving conversation. So at some point, they're all going to become teenagers. And, you know, even if we are having simple messages, it's still really good for adults too. At any point, you know, some of these key things to keep in mind will be relevant, and it's always good to have as part of your toolkit about the key messages you want to provide.
So Kat, parents are often concerned about causing distress to their children if they tell them about their MS. Can you guide us through how parents, caregivers can approach this?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's really understandable that parents feel this way, because we all want to protect our kids. And there are a number of common concerns that parents have, and so we've put a couple of them on our screen today about, you know, should I tell my kids? When is the right time? How would I even start the conversation? You know, what kind of reactions should I expect our kids to have? You know, what are the pros and cons of disclosing or not disclosing? And are we making MS, you know, too much a conversation or too little a conversation in our household? So what I want to sort of draw to on this slide is that if you can think back to when you were first diagnosed and how you felt, you probably had a mix of emotions initially. And then with time and with the right information, you realise that this is actually a condition that you can live with. So by choosing these right messages for your kids, you're helping guide them to manage the MS in their lives. Because even if they're not the ones actually diagnosed with the condition, as a family, they are all still living with MS in their lives. And I'm hoping that as parents, you'll have a better bedside manner when talking to your kids than maybe what some of your specialists had when they spoke to you. Because we know that there's some amazing specialists out there, and ones that, you know, can be a little bit blunt or a little less forthcoming with helpful information. So, you know, Research has actually been done, into this, and it has found, and it was presented in the International Journal of MS Care, that said the ability of children to adjust to having a parent having MS actually depends partially on how much they know about the MS. They found in the research that children wanted to be well informed about the condition. So telling them and discussing the changes that MS brings, yes, while it can be particularly challenging, children want to be able to trust you, and being honest with them helps them to do that. Children can be supportive and may surprise you by doing or saying something which shows you how well they understand and how much they're on board with being positive about this. So how much you tell them though, and the detail, depends on the age of your child and also their temperament. And so we'll actually be going into a bit more detail about this throughout the presentation. So, so we talk about the benefits of actually telling your kids about MS, but there are many families who have not yet spoken about their diagnosis, and that's okay too. Okay, so there's no rush that you have to do it as soon as you're diagnosed. But there might be some times when, you might tell them, before maybe you're thinking about it. So maybe there's a relapse that might bring everything out to the open unexpectedly, or perhaps it's your children who are going to initiate asking the questions. So it is really beneficial to have the language in the back of your mind and to have some key messages that you want to give them, so that at least you feel confident and you feel ready for when the time is right, when you do choose to have those conversations. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to sort of talk about those initial conversations with MS. So although it's a conversation that we know will continue over time as your children grow up, it can be those initial conversations which are the most emotionally charged for you. And then we're going to move on to the evolving conversations of MS. So, that's because the healthiest family relationships are the ones where there is the open communication. So that means that we're going to suggest that MS is never a closed topic, and that conversations should evolve. So we'll touch on, when MS brings change to your family as the children get older. So, they will turn into teenagers and how to deal, some advice for dealing with this. And although we are going to focus on really positive messages, it is good to know that, should there be an adverse reaction, what are some things to keep in mind? It's not just going to be me, presenting all the boring theoretical stuff to you. We do have Sue with us. She has that personal perspective, and it's really such a gift for us today. We are going to try and break up our presentation, as Catherine said, with a video halfway through, just to give you your ears a bit of a break, because it can be a little bit information heavy, and we'll try to be very conscious of that too.
So, Kat, I imagine some planning for the first conversation could be particularly helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you haven't spoken about MS in your family yet, because your kids are still little, or because you're newly diagnosed and your symptoms are quite mild and you haven't felt the need to yet. So basically, I hope that you get the message that we're not suggesting you script anything or have sleepless nights preparing for it, but we hope that we can leave you with a few tips to help give you that confidence to make having those conversations a little easier. So, planning the conversation, what are some key things to keep in mind? We really think it's so important that you prepare yourself emotionally and that you do that little self-check-in, okay? So if you've only just been really recently diagnosed, have you taken the time to come to terms with your diagnosis? And that's because we want your body language to be as positive and as reassuring as your words. So if you're finding yourself getting a bit emotional and getting a bit teary or appearing overwhelmingly upset when you talk to your children, it may actually counteract any positive messages you want to give them, and it might be harder to convince them that everything's going to be okay. And this isn't just relevant for people who have been newly diagnosed, because it is that roller coaster ride of emotions, and there'll be times when you're feeling more positive about about your health, and there'll be times when you're going to be perhaps angry or frustrated by your MS. So it's really important to do that self-check-in regularly with yourself about how you're traveling. And if you're concerned at all about not being in the best headspace to talk about MS, wait. There'll be other times to have these conversations. It's also not a bad idea to draw on those around you. So, and think about, well, is this a conversation that I'm going to have alone with my children, or am I going to involve others? A really good idea is to talk to someone who, either a partner or a close family member, about the messages that you're going to give to your kids, so that you're all on the same page. So that one of you isn't giving really general information and the other one giving really detailed information and catching the other parent off guard with some of the questions. So draw on those around you and make sure that you have a plan for how much are we going to talk to our kids about, when are we going to do it, and how are we going to sort of approach any tricky questions or need for further support. And then, of course, the right setting is also really important. So are you going to do it at home or over a meal on the couch? Time of day. Time of day is actually a really important one. So we do have a bit of advice around that one, where we suggest not doing it sort of after the kids' bedtime story, before they go to bed, where they might sort of be lying in bed sort of thinking of it. So having a conversation sort of earlier in the day, where the kids have that time to process the information, have a think about it, and then still be able to ask you questions before going to bed, might be a bit easier for them. I mean, are you going to have a formal conversation with all the kids together, or are you going to wait till each of your kids initiates the questions individually? These are all the things that there's no right or wrong answer, but it's good to have a think about, well, what do I prefer and what do I think my kids are going to respond best to?
I wonder, Sue, if you can remember when you had your first conversations with your children, how did you approach this?
Okay, I do remember that I had quite a variety of strange symptoms before I had a diagnosis. So my children were sort of early high school age. So I think they knew something was going on, but we weren't quite sure what was going on. So I think the conversation was really around the fact that they had noticed some strange things happening. So I think it was important to have a conversation with them around, something is going on, but we don't quite know what is going on. And then when I did actually have a diagnosis, we did have a sit-down conversation with my kids, and it was really important to not have any distractions. So, no television, no noise in the background, and provided them with some good information. And I think the key message was that we're going to be okay. This isn't a condition I'm going to be having to go into hospital all the time, or I wasn't going, it was something that was very manageable. And I also had a friend at the time who had MS, a family member, and that was good too, because she was a young mum, and she was actually ended up in a wheelchair, but she was also representing Australia in the Paralympics, so she was really living her life and that sort of thing. So I think my kids had a little bit of awareness about MS, and they had done the readathon at school and those sorts of things, so a little bit of awareness. But I didn't want to bombard them either with a lot of information that was going to make them frightened. I was really concerned, and I really wanted to get that message across that this is a condition that is manageable, and we're going to be okay.
Thanks, Sue. That's sort of like giving chunks of information as needed, but not overwhelming. Having a great role model available for your family to see that life might change a bit, but it's not the end, and the things you can get through this. So yeah, so thank you for that.
No, it's fantastic. So we just have a couple of extra tips sort of to think about before you have that conversation, and one is think about sort of how you might normalise MS. So we reevaluate what is normal throughout our lives, and you might go, well, surely there's nothing normal about MS, but what does your new normal look like? And so before MS, what is normal, like, when you bring a baby home for the first time. So, what was your normal sleep-in time before kids versus what a normal sleep-in time is, after kids. So with MS, what's your new normal like? Does it mean now that you're grocery shopping online and getting home delivery rather than trying to race into the shops after doing the school pickup and trying to get dinner prepared, and just the fatigue, feeling like it's all too much. We also think it's really valuable that you can normalise MS by explaining how many other families in Australia are also living, with MS. Show your children the resources that are available for kids, and link in with the MS family activities, which we'll cover at the end of the presentation, because there's a lot of opportunities for kids to see that there are other families living well with MS too. We also want to focus on, yes, that there will be changes that MS does bring, but we want you to focus on what changes MS won't bring. So don't dwell on the things that have changed, but keep reminding your kids about all the things that still are part of your family that are really valued. So, for example, we're still going to have our family movie nights, with popcorn, and, even if Dad can't umpire the local footy matches anymore, he's still going to be there and cheering you all on. And that's the important thing. So, don't focus on the negatives, focus on all the beautiful things that your family still enjoys, with or without the MS. We also think that, particularly with younger children, it's good to externalise the MS, so that they can see that it's different from mum and dad themselves. So speaking to a young mum a little while ago, she said that a handy strategy in her family was that they used nicknames for some of the symptoms of MS. So she would say that, oh, Mr. Dropsy is visiting again, when she was starting to have some sort of worse symptoms. And it's good to do, because it acknowledges with the child that, yes, there are things happening. We're not trying to ignore it, but it's it's less confronting as well, because they are going to be really observant. They are going to pick up on things, and if you hide sort of what's going on, that's when some of their fears might play out in their head. And sort of my last point on this slide is probably what I think is most important, is that you really need to separate the symptoms from the person, so that if you're having a really rough day, you need to say, I'm frustrated at the MS and not the kids. It's like whenever you're disciplining the children, you're saying, I love you, but I don't like that particular behaviour. And so you're not making them feel like they're a bad person, but it's the behaviour that is the problem. And the same goes with MS. So it's not mum and dad that are it's not inherently part of them. It is the condition that's causing a bit of havoc at the moment. And you can just feel as much frustrated at the MS as they might be as well. Okay, so I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to keep powering through. So, and just quickly, thinking about in their shoes, I want you to think about what is actually important for them to know. So, using language that's really at their level and developmental stage, and we'll go through that just quickly. They're not so much interested in the pathology and how many lesions are on which part of the brain. They really need to know sort of what's happening to their lives. Are you still going to be there to take them to basketball? And that's what they're going to take. So when you do start the conversation, listen to the actual answers of the children and adjust their conversation accordingly, because you might have this great preparation all done. They might ask one question and be ready just to go back to their video game or whatever it is that they were playing. Okay, so you need to sort of see how much information they're ready to take on, and adjust accordingly. I also want you to think about sort of their temperaments as well, because you're the same children, same mum and dad probably, but you'll know that they all have different personalities. And so is your child someone who is really adaptable, so that you can give them the information, they're like, yep, cool mum, no worries, and off they go and they're not bothered? Or are they someone who might be a little bit more sensitive, and you need to have a more gentle approach and introduce the information slowly and over time in small little bits, so that they don't feel overwhelmed? Again, are you having the conversation as a group, or do you need to sort of sit down with each children one by one because of their different ages, or the temperaments, and you need to tailor the information to them. Now, however it is you choose to do it, we have resources that we can give you to help you have the conversation so that you feel like you're not doing it alone. Okay, so I found this great resource. Catherine found a great resource for me about a guide for families from the MS Canada organisation, and from 0 to 3 years, children are very sort of focused on how anything sort of affects them. So what they're going to be mostly worried about is how any changes affects them, and separation from their parents. So messages that reassure them that you're going to be okay and that life isn't, they're still going to be able to get to the park and play with their toys. That's sort of the key thing. From 3 to 6 years, again, they're still very self-centered developmentally, but they're starting to understand the concepts of right and wrong and good and bad, and that's sort of how you're going to target some of your conversations. So medication is really good, the MS is really bad, and you're still keeping it quite simple. From 6 to 12 years, their understanding may still be challenging, but they are getting a better idea about it. It is a combination of symptoms. They can help out a bit more and assume more responsibility at home. And I'm really going to talk a bit more about this, about helping out at home versus being a carer, and making sure that we understand the difference. And then finally, when they get to become to their teenage years, that's the time when they're trying to define their own identity. They tend to distance themselves from their parents at this age, but might feel guilty. And so it's about finding the right balance of home responsibilities plus independence.
So Kat, have you got some helpful ways that parents listening and family listening could explain symptoms to children?
Yeah, for sure. So whatever the age of the kids, using relatable examples is really effective. And for some of you that have the adult children, as basic as these are, it's really important for adults too. Like, it's a great way for them to understand. And so don't feel like you just need to use this language for kids too. So kids are really intuitive and sensitive to changes in environment. So a good way to start a conversation is to gauge what they already know. So have you ever noticed that mum drops things sometimes, that dad gets really tired in the afternoon, that mum has been a bit forgetful lately? Those kind of questions. Another great question to ask is, have you ever heard of MS before? And what do you know about it already? Because you might be surprised that maybe that they've had an MS ambassador speak at their school, or maybe they've been watching, when they're watching TV, they've seen all those dream home lottery ads that we've been showing, recently. For most of us growing up, the MS readathon was something that we all knew about, even if we didn't actually know what MS was all about. Maybe they have friends whose mum and dad also have MS, and maybe they've heard a little bit spoken about it, through them. So use that information that they give you in these questions to sort of then know the starting point for the next parts of your conversation. Using relatable examples is so powerful. It's really what the kids are going to take away more than any sort of theoretical kind of information. And so what we were hoping to do is ask you whether you had any great analogies that you use for talking about MS to your children or to your friends, that maybe we can share, because it might help someone else listening in today. So if you have a go-to analogy that you use, would you mind typing it in now so that Catherine can see? And if there's anything good, we can not anything good, we can sort of share, sorry, we can share sort of with the group some of your ideas. One of the more common ones is sort of using the analogy of wiring to a house. It's the electrical cables have got a little bit of a fault, so the protective coating has been broken away and it's affecting the current. Some people like to say that mum is wearing her MS goggles today to explain blurred vision. Dad's MS has caused his batteries to go flat, so he just needs a little rest to recharge. Mum's, legs or arms has pins and needles, just like what you get when you sit in the same spot for too long. Did you get anything today?
No, not yet, but I'm
That's all
thinking
right.
once you've got them, might trigger
Yeah.
some other versions of people's, because everyone uses different language and families, and there's different, say, examples of their life, so they relate to different things.
Yeah. Look, if anything comes to mind, you know, by all means, would love for you to type it in, and because we find it all really interesting, and you know what we've got on this screen here is only a very small example of all the different, you know, ways that a lot of people can use to explain MS.
There seems to be a number of common questions that children ask Kat. It'll be great if you could explain these and maybe some pointers of how they could be answered.
Yeah, fantastic. So we really want you to encourage questions. So some kids are naturally curious, some just want a little bit of clarification, but it's the questions if they're not feeling like they can answer questions, ask questions, that's when we're getting a bit more worried about, you know, what are they internalising? So better that you know if they're worried about something, because then you can address it. So encouraging questions at any stage and checking in with your kids is really, really important. So we're not worried so much about the explaining how many lesions are on whichever part of the brain, you know, it is for your MS. We're looking about what's relevant to kids, and, you know, drawing back on the egocentricity of children at a young age, a lot of the common questions will revolve around them, surprisingly enough. So questions kids may ask, you know, how do people get MS? Well, we don't know why some people get MS and others don't. But it happens when the body's immune system doesn't work properly. The immune system is what should take care of the body, but it starts attacking the wrong things. Okay, and doctors are working really hard to try and find why that's happening and try and find a way to fix it. Can you die from MS? Well, this is where we acknowledge that no two people with MS experience symptoms exactly the same way, but a really positive message is to say that, you know, generally people don't have a changed life expectancy, you know, because of their MS, and that mum and dad are going to be around.
Yeah. Just on that, Kat, we just had a comment from David who said, my daughter assumed that when people kept saying, oh, sorry, you were sick, that I was going to die. The last person who'd been sick was a grandfather who passed away. So I've always been very open and clear with the kids due to this.
And that's really important. And I think we will touch on that a bit later about, you know, the messages about, you know, hospitals. If you have seen someone pass away in a hospital, well, then that is going to be what the kids know about it. But, you know, we can talk about, well, hospitals are good places where people go to get better. That's where the doctors are who are trained to try and make sure that people are okay. So a really great point to mention. Another common question is, will I catch it too? And I think if my parent was diagnosed with MS, I'd be really, really keen to know about that too. So, you know, while we'll say that, you know, MS isn't inherited directly like hair colour or height, it is important to acknowledge that the genes, you know, do play a part. So there is a slightly increased risk that children of parents with MS can get it. That risk, you know, varies depending on the relationship of the kids. And so Sue printed off some good information for me, you know, about the research. And basically what they found is that the lifetime risk of the general population of getting MS is 1 in 330. Now, you might go, well, is that a lot? Well, when you tie it into the lifetime risk of getting cancer being 1 in 3, you know, you would say, well, actually, no, that's actually quite a low risk. And then, but we need to know that, you know, if, where is it? So, you know, as a child of someone with MS, that risk will increase to 1 in about 48. But again, if you tie it into sort of the risk of getting a lot of other condition, it still is really, really quite small. And so we want to reassure children that, yes, you know, it's possible for any of us to get MS. That, you know, just because you have it doesn't mean that that's necessarily part of their future too.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, please.
I think another really important message with all of these questions is that this is a condition that is very livable. You know, people live very well with MS. Medication helps manage symptoms, and people can have an ordinary life despite having a diagnosis of MS. So even though it may seem doom and gloom, there's still a positive story that people live well with this illness or disease.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sue. Okay. This may seem like a strange one, but is it my fault? And that is particularly a question that kids might come to mind, especially if mum or dad was diagnosed soon after they were born. And that actually is quite common, because remember that MS is most commonly diagnosed in those child bearing years, and so you really need to reassure kids that no one caused mum or dad's MS, and you need to be careful of the language that you use. So if you're talking to family and friends and saying, oh yeah, I was diagnosed soon after Lucy was born, that if kids are overhearing that they don't associate that, oh my goodness, I was born and that's when mum developed her MS, it's somehow related to me. And the reason we put that on there is because we have found, like, at kids camps and whatnot, that these are some of the fears that children have had. How will I get to my friend's place? Who will take me to basketball? And again, this is what kids at that age, they just need to know that there is going to be that normality still, and that they're going to be okay too. So it's, while some things will change with MS, where possible, reassure them that you're going to try and keep their routines the same, but they're going to need to be flexible too. Where possible, have a backup plan in case you may need to spend some time in hospital or have a few days, sort of at home resting, and you can't sort of complete the regular sort of tasks. Can a partner or friend step in to maintain your child's routine? But also have that conversation with your kids that sometimes plans need to change too sometimes.
Okay. So Sue, did any of these common questions that Kat's mentioned come up for you?
I think one I do remember is because we did have a friend in a wheelchair, was the concern that you're going to end up in a wheelchair. And I think that conversation was really around saying, I don't know what's down the track. We don't know what's going to happen, but if somebody does end up in a wheelchair, that's not a horrible thing either, because people sometimes find that ending up in a wheelchair is giving them more mobility or a better opportunity to get out and about and do things, because maybe their legs didn't work all that great to start with. So I think the whole wheelchair thing is in people's mind, because especially when we're sort of looking at that image of somebody in a wheelchair when we're talking about fundraising and those sorts of things. So I think, yeah, the children really fear about that sort of thing, and they are, as we've said, a little bit self-centered. How's this going to affect me? Yeah, I don't think there was a lot of questions. I think the main thing I had for them was, I'm really struggling with fatigue. What can you do to help? I might need to be asking you to do a little bit more, or bring your clothes down to the laundry and, help tidy up and those sorts of things. So.
Well, that's right. It's that visibility of wheelchair, but the invisibility of all the other symptoms that people with MS often experience that is perhaps more difficult to explain to children because they can't see it.
Yes.
And that's where I think that externalising it, that this is part of MS, not that mum's just being lazy. I'm reluctant to use the word, but mum's not just being lazy. This is actually the symptom of MS, and it's different to who mum is, and it's sort of out of her control. Okay, so powering through, there are a couple of key messages that we want to give to children. Really important one, MS isn't contagious. You can't catch it like you do with a cold. I have MS and it is with me forever, but scientists and doctors are working very hard to find the cure. They just haven't been able to figure it out just yet. And nobody knows why people get MS. No one caused it, and no one could have done, nothing could have been done to prevent getting it. And these are not just messages to give to your children, but these are messages that are helpful for children to be able to explain MS to others if they need to, and that's really powerful too, so that they don't feel overwhelmed by it either. So again, that people don't die from MS, but it's really important that mum and dad sees the doctors regularly to get checkups and make sure that they're on the best treatment to help them live well with it. And just lastly, that MS is unpredictable, so you can't see a lot of MS, but it's always there. And there are times when you might need to help out a little bit more, especially if mum and dad is not feeling so well, which is exactly sort of drawing on that same point that Sue just mentioned. Yeah.
Megan had a question I think is quite relevant to hear, Kat, if that's okay. So is there an age that you would recommend to start conversation? My child is only 5.5.
Yeah. there was something that I think I'm going to draw on right at the end, but basically, if you're old enough to talk, you're old enough to talk about MS is something that gets spoken about. And so it might not be such a formal conversation for a child that's really young, but if you have symptoms that might be noticed, it's making sure that you acknowledge them, because you don't want your child to start fearing the worst, or if they notice something, thinking that, oh my goodness, this is really serious, and start imagining something that could be easily addressed and reassured, reassurance provided to a child, really easy. So, for a child that's really young, you're keeping it really simple. We have some really cute videos, so it might even be showing a little video on YouTube that talks about it. So what we'll do is, because I'm a bit conscious that we're talking a lot and time's running out, is we'll show the video at the end if we can, for those who can stay on board, but we're also going to show lots of other resources that are great even for little kids. So 5.5, yeah, I think that's an age where they will start noticing things, and it's not a bad thing to just sort of gently start introducing some of these messages.
I think sometimes the conversations are prompted by the children too, because if they notice something, you might then want to say, yes, mum is really getting tired and this is why. So I think, just being guided by what children understand and allaying their fears is really important.
And whether you're actually calling it MS at this point, or just acknowledging the symptoms, and that, like for example, the dropping thing, the mum with the 4-year-old who said that, the child is noticing that I'm dropping things a little bit more at the moment, and naming it, and having a bit of a laugh about it and downplaying it. So whether you actually call it MS and have that official conversation, or whether you're sort of just acknowledging that, this is happening for us, let's have a laugh about it if you can, and let's be really positive about not letting the children worry, or start making it out to be a bit bigger than what it is in their minds.
So Kat, like most conversations on important family issues and values, there's never just one conversation, is there? They evolve as children get older, and have further questions or new challenges in their MS journey. What is good advice on how to continue to keep the communication channels and opportunities open?
Yeah, so you don't want to make MS a bigger part of your life than what it already is, but it really is important to do a quick check-in with your children from time to time, because yes, you might have that child that's really great at initiating questions, but you might have that child who might still feel a bit self-conscious about sort of, asking something that they've noticed that maybe you haven't spoken about with them too. So that little quick check-in, making sure that if they are worrying about something or notice something, that they're getting that chance to ask, and that you're showing that you're really happy to answer anything that they might ask, is really important. We want to touch on sort of, with those evolving conversations, what happens when things have changed. So you might be quite stable with your MS for quite a while, but then a relapse might happen, or you start a new medication, or there is a new symptom that presents. Key to this is that reassurance, that that positive message is really important at any and every stage. So it is going to be confronting if you have a relapse, but keep reminding kids that you are working with doctors, you are going into hospital, if that's the case, because you are trying to get better. They are trying to help you, and the whole purpose is to try and maintain everything as much as possible, and keep everything normal. And when those things happen, that's a great time to give the message that it's never more important than for the family to work together as a family unit to help each other through these changes. It's not uncommon for people, when they have a change of treatment, to have some, side effects, or, for example, if you're taking a tablet medication and now you're starting an injectable, or you're having to have an infusion, that could be a really great time to sort of bring up the MS conversation again and ask your kids if they have any questions, or if there's any concerns that they have. Some new medications might bring about side effects, so again, they might need to just help out a little bit more, just to get you over that little hurdle, and you just need to explain, well, this is not forever, this is hopefully just a side effect that sort of settle down soon. You know, MS will bring about change to the household routine sometimes, and so, you know, you just need to talk about, well, change is inevitable, and it's just something that doesn't have to be bad, and we want to work together. So, you know, maybe because of your fatigue, you might now get a house cleaner in who comes, you know, weekly into the house. Or maybe because of your MS, you might need other care professionals coming around. Well, or maybe some small modifications need to be done to the house. And if that's the case, you just need to tell the kids that this is a good thing, because it means that mum and dad are going to have more energy to have time to spend with you and to not feel so tired and to do the things that they want to do, you know, with you as a family. And I guess, you know, Sue's already mentioned about, you know, wheelchairs, and that might be confronting for kids if they think that might, if they see you in a wheelchair, or they think that might be your future. But again, bring it back to something that they can understand. So, well, a lot of people wear, you know, reading glasses because that helps them see. It's just an aid to help them get about, to do the things they need to do. Someone who has difficulty with hearing will wear a hearing aid. So we have lots of aids and equipment that all serve to help a person in. And if someone needs a wheelchair, it's to make sure that they can still get out and about and be safe and keep the normality in the family. So it's nothing to be scared or worried about.
So as the teenage years approach, they're usually a roller coaster time, and it's important for the teenagers to have opportunities to socialise with friends and engage in activities outside the home. How can families prepare teenagers for this time in their lives? Because there's 40% with primary school age children 5 to 12, so they're moving into that time at some point soon.
No one escapes the teenage years. So look, I wish I had the amazing advice for dealing with all the emotional roller coasters that you're going to go on. But, you know, a couple of things to keep in mind as children get older is that they're going to have more access to the internet. And so, you know, like with most things, with the internet, you want to make sure that they understand the good and bad aspects of it and the information that they might come across. So, you know, even with adults, we have this conversation about, well, you know, if they come across a blog from someone with MS and it's particularly negative, well, remind the kids that, you know, yes, there are going to be some people that's their way of sort of communicating, but most people who are getting on with their lives with MS aren't sitting on the computer writing sort of about their woes. They're living their lives, and so know how to see that information being in context of the bigger picture. You know, if your children have typed in something about MS and then all of a sudden they start being bombarded with ads about, you know, stem cell treatments in Russia and Mexico, and they suggest that's the place for their next holiday, family holiday, well, you might want to have a chat to them about the information that they're seeing, and that, you know, not all of it is necessarily coming from reliable sources. And this is where it's your responsibility to show them, well, here's the places where we will find reliable information, and that it's really good to read, and here's the places where, you know, if you're seeing something and you're not too sure, we want you to have a chat to us, you know, about it, and we can tell you about why we think it's good, why we think, well, it sounds nice, but, you know, these are the concerns we might have, and this is how we're going to address it. Okay, so internet, absolutely a good thing, but only when it's used well. As they get older, the influence of their peers and their friends is going to be increasingly prevalent. Children will want to fit in with their friends, and they may struggle with seeing mum or dad if their MS, you know, makes them feel a bit different from their friends. So this is where I think it's really helpful that if you're giving the children those key messages that we spoke about earlier, they then have the language to speak about their MS with their friends. Because, you know, it's probably coming from a place where the friends don't have any experience of MS, it's new for them. So the more that your kids feel comfortable with having a chat about it, and that it's not such a big deal, and that, you know, you're still a normal family, that's going to, you know, help them feel like they're not so different. I'm just having a quick think. And then I guess finally, this is a big point that I want to touch on, is that as children get older, it's about finding that balance between having that independence, but also being part of the family and having responsibilities. you don't want to go too skewed in either way. So you don't want them to, you don't want to feel guilty about your MS and say, and give the kids, sure, do whatever you want, and because you're so fearful about sort of the maybe constraints that MS may have been brought on, but you don't want them to be sort of at home all the time, and because they're doing all the caring roles. So what I have seen quite commonly sort of in my role as a social work advisor is that you've got family problems because the mum or dad feels so guilty about their MS and about some of the things that it stops them from doing, that they don't even want to ask their kids to make their bed or to unpack the dishwasher because they're trying to prove that they're still capable of doing everything. And so what you have is kids that are growing up that are very selfish and self-centered, and they're not contributing to the whole family unit. If, however, on the other hand, your kids aren't getting the chance to go out with their friends or get the part-time job, then because they're needing to provide a lot of that care, then that's also a problem. And so I would like you to link in with MS and talk to an advisor or a peer support person and talk about, well, what are some of the options that we have available to us so that we can bring the balance back to independence versus the responsibilities of a family unit.
So you mentioned that you've got 3 young adult children. Have you got any sort of comments on how you approach those teenage years with that sort of balance, particularly for the desire for independence and family responsibilities maybe?
Yeah, okay. Well, I think it's okay to ask for help. I think if I was really struggling with fatigue, it's okay to ask somebody else's, parent, can you pick up my child on the way through? I think it's okay to ask for help. And I think sometimes from being a very independent person to actually acknowledging that I can't do it all is not a bad message for kids. Sometimes they need to know that what you were saying about contributing to the family, just because I'm the chief cook and bottle washer, sometimes that's not always going to be the way. You can contribute, and I don't think it's ever an issue to expect your children to clean up after themselves and to contribute, because I think ultimately it makes them a more responsible adult, and then eventually they're going to go out into their own place and they need to know how to cook and set the table and do the dishes and do the washing and contribute.
Their future husbands and wives will thank you for it in the future. So look, I am conscious of time. We've got two more slides, primarily full of information, and then we're going to talk in about resources. So hang in there if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with all the information. But I think these next few slides are pretty important. So as much as we're really trying to focus on the positive messages, we do want to make sure that, should there be an adverse reaction, that you are looking out for it, and that sort of where to turn for help if it is happening in your particular family. So sometimes normal emotions like fear or sadness or guilt might not seem overt or obvious to start off with, but they might lead to changes in a child's behaviour, and that's probably going to be more the case in younger children because they don't have the language to use to express sort of any concerns that they have. So signs to watch out for, would be sort of if there's sort of mood swings that are, not characteristic of your child, if they've got higher anxiety or stress, or if they're sort of only seeing the negative in situations, and particularly in younger kids, like, if the temper tantrums are sort of more than the usual of I've got a 3-year-old, we have temper tantrums sort of nearly every day, but if you're finding that sort of, your child best, if it's different to sort of what you're seeing as a regular, I didn't get that chocolate bar, then, you might sort of alert to something else is going on. Changes in their personality. So if you see your child trying to act older or younger than they really are, if they're starting to focus more on their own body and their wellness, kind of getting a little bit obsessed about it, or if they're starting to act overly protective of mum or dad, okay? They're some of the things that, might alert you to something not being quite right. If they're starting to withdraw from friends or activities, that might set a little red flag. If they start lying to friends about your illness, that's probably a time to have that conversation with them and find out what's going on, and maybe sort of reset those key messages again. And And of course, you know, if they're having nightmares, if they're having trouble falling asleep, or if behaviour like bedwetting is starting, you know, I'd like you to start to think about, all right, well, this isn't characteristic of my child. You know, do I need to go get some help for myself or all of my children to help deal with this a bit better? I want to just quickly give it an example that I had a conversation with one of my clients recently. And so the mum had been having some falls, and she'd been in hospital a couple of times, which was sort of out of character. Now, she had a daughter with autism, and what started happening was that daughter with autism started trying to escape from class. So at a regular school, but started trying to sneak out of class, and that alerted the school to get the welfare officer on board, who was able to find out that the child was trying to sneak out of class because they were so worried about mum being in hospital when they got home that they were trying to be back at home as soon as possible. Now, the mum didn't know necessarily that was happening until the school counsellor was able to sort of share that information, and then together we could look at ways to sort of support the mum, prevent some of those falls, reassure the child, and move on, so that the child could feel more confident and less concerned and anxious, and you know, get on more positively with their schooling and their friendships and whatnot.
I was just going to say, Kate, we've received some advice and reflection from David about his daughter, which is sort of relevant to this area, and was saying that his daughter was 5 when diagnosis occurred, and they're very good at hiding information or not taking it on, and they found that at school her behaviour had changed and wasn't quite acceptable, and they found that by taking part in positive MS events like the Mega Swim has been very helpful, because she's seen you know, people living well, and also using the village concept, where it takes a village to look after someone. So it's close family, friends, the school and primary school will keep an eye on how the child's going, and alerting them to any issues that they can see, which has been really helpful. And just the fact that, you know, as you said before, that children often anything different about their parent often puts them into that potential for bullying in a school. So it's just been an alert to that, and having those communication channels open really, and having that village around.
And you might not want to shout your MS from the rooftops and, you know, tell anyone and everyone, but you're letting the school know so that they can look out for sort of any changes. And, you know, if you nip it in the bud, it's always a preferred option than letting sort of something get out of hand. So that's a really great point to name. I want to sort of touch on this last line on this slide, because I think it's really important, is that, you know, as children, you know, get older, you know, they will start to exert their independence, and, you know, they're going to feel embarrassed by you. That's normal. That's not even about MS. That's just because you're a parent and you're daggy, right? But, you know, if it is sort of getting worse because of the MS, I want you to keep in mind that it's never, ever, ever okay for a child to direct their feelings of anger or frustration about their MS directly to you. So if that's happening, address it straight away, and, you know, put the same boundaries and expectations around their behaviour like you would with any other situation. You know, sometimes parents, because they feel guilty, they'll sort of have a few more concessions that, you know, oh, I'm going to like let that behaviour slide because, you know, it is hard, you know, that I've got MS. It's still your responsibility as a parent to make sure that they have appropriate reactions to any adversity in life. And so show them appropriate way to behave. You know, kicking the cat, you know, is definitely something that, you know, it is not okay. And you know, whether you have MS or whether it's anything else that they have to deal with, we still have that same expectations on appropriate behaviours.
I'd just like to tell everyone that it is 12 o'clock and the webinar was to run till 12, but we've got some really great information that we'd like to continue sharing. So we'd really welcome everyone to stay online, probably for another 10, 15 minutes to get through it all, because it's really valuable stuff. If you do have to leave because you've got other things to do, please know that the webinar will be recorded and you can listen to the remainder of it. So I'd really like Kat to spend, and Sue, to be able to continue on with the webinar to complete everything they've prepared today. Because it is really valuable, but we do appreciate that you may need to leave and you can access that information later.
Promise we won't take it personal. I lied. I said there was only 2 more slides. There's now only 2 more slides, so of the actual information. So do forgive me. And these ones are really good. So believe it or not, there are positive aspects of having a parent with MS. And so studies have actually looked into it, and they've shown that kids can be more self-reliant. They can be more independent than other kids their age. And it can give them increased skills that leads to greater self-esteem and coping abilities. And they're more responsible, more helpful, and more sensitive to the needs of others. And I think this is where I know that, Sue, I've loved what you've had to say about this. And this is from a slide that we used last year when we didn't have Sue with us, but we wanted to leave it on because it's some great notes for you to take away and look back on, afterwards. But your tips are just wonderful about how.
I think the main thing I've noticed in my kids is that this has formed a little bit of their personality and how they treat other people, and not just me. So if they see another person with a disability, they're more conscious of other people's struggles, and I think that's really important. It just makes them nicer human beings.
Makes them kind.
Yes, yeah, and I think that is really important. And I think the awareness of what's going on is really important. My youngest has put together some fundraising ideas with her work, and they've also had a team at the MS walk and fun run called Run for Mum, and that's been, I've been so proud of them in the fact that they've raised money for MS and they've taken it on board, and they share knowledge with other people. And sometimes they say, if somebody has come to them and said, oh, my auntie just got diagnosed, they might say, oh yeah, my mum's got that, it's okay. And I think it's just empowered them to share information and be considerate. But yeah, some of those tips I was sort of saying was that I think being open about disability is really important, and it's not just whether it's MS. I mean, other people have different sort of things going in their life, and it just creates an awareness, which I think is really important. And I think the other things I've sort of said on there is being responsible within the family unit. So, I mean, I do love to cook, but sometimes I just run out of steam at the end of the day, and they have learned that I continue with my passion of cooking and preparing a family meal, but they need to step up and help, wash the dishes afterwards and that sort of thing. And even when they were teenagers, I would say to them, I'm happy to do your washing, but I'm not going to go looking for it. So if you want it done, it goes in the laundry. And a similar sort of thing at the end of the day, we had a 2-story house, so I can bring the washing in and fold it up, but you're responsible for how it gets into your bedroom drawers, and those sorts of things. So I think there was just some lessons around some of those family rules that you try to not let things change too much, but you need to grow up and be a bit more responsible. And that's not just because I've got MS. I think that's important for children to contribute anyway.
And it is, I think you'll find that in families where they do that, there is that sort of care and consideration for the family in general, rather than the attitude of me and how can I get the most out of, mum or dad taking me somewhere, as opposed to I need to be considerate of everyone else too. So yeah, really, really powerful messages, and a good one to take away from this talk.
So Kate, you said there's no hard and fast rules, as we know, for all families communicate differently. But if you've got any general strategies and key ideas that people can take away from today's webinar.
Yeah, so I have 5 take-home messages that I'd like to sort of just finish up on. So obviously a positive attitude and ongoing reassurance is the main one. We spoke about it really early on, is to normalise the MS. It doesn't need to be spoken about in hushed tones. It doesn't need to be kept a dark secret. Make it amongst the many other normal things in your household that you talk about. And the best way to do that is to bring it up casually, not in a negative way, but in simple things like, asking your kids to fetch your walking stick if your leg isn't feeling right today. So where possible, try and normalise it. It's now part of your family life. Make sure that it is part of an ongoing and open conversation. So you don't need to feel like you're telling your kids everything about MS all at once or in that first conversation. Tell them a little bit. If it's going well, keep the conversation going. If they've had enough and they're not interested, they're turning away and they want to just sort of get back to what they're doing, you know, keep coming back at different times. If they have a question, make sure you make them feel comfortable to ask it and take the time to answer it. Don't lie to them, but make sure you keep the information appropriate to their age and stage of development. Share how you're feeling, both physically and emotionally. So don't be afraid to start the conversation, because children will appreciate it when you open the door. It can help to share your own feelings with them. So expressing sadness or anger or frustration shows your kids that these are actually normal emotions for anyone to feel, even for grown-ups. But it's your responsibility then to show them appropriate ways to deal with that behaviour. Okay, so what's appropriate for it when you're feeling angry? What's appropriate for when you're feeling sad, and how are healthy ways to deal with it? As we spoke about, allow children to ask their questions, and remember that we're all in this together. So don't wrap your kids in cotton wool because of any guilt that you feel is associated with your MS. So I'm so scared about my kids becoming carers. Remember, they should be helped make dinners or help with their school lunches or help unpack the dishwasher or make their beds. It is healthy, and we've mentioned this a lot because it is so important. And just a final message for you. Remember, you are the kids' parents, and there'll be many times in your parenting journey that you're going to come across tricky situations and have to make decisions about how to handle a situation. So like you would with any other challenge that parenting brings, trust your gut, get the support and advice you need, and handle it the best way you can. And with your kids, whatever life throws at them, and that life is a roller coaster, and there's going to be happy times and there's going to be challenging times, give the message that you love them beyond words, and that regardless of what happens, you are there for them. Because then if that message is key and at the forefront, anything else will be secondary, and that you can work through it together.
So, well, thank you, Kat, for all that. And some people have had to leave us already, but I think it's important just to go through the resources that are available. Everyone would have received the resources as part of the handout. So if you have already left, then they are available to you in your email. So if we can go through those, that would be great.
So much easier to listen to this part, and this is the stuff that's going to just make it easier. So it's key resources that are available, because you might be thinking about how I'm going to have that conversation with kids. Well, there are many that have been there before you who've asked the same questions, and so resources have been developed, finding out what's worked before to make it easier for those sort of, approaching those sort of stages. So just quickly, really don't feel like you have to do it alone. Find someone else for your child to talk to, and it could be that close family friend, another relative, that they might not want to ask you every single question. They might sort of ask that cheeky question to an auntie or uncle or auntie. So just make sure that they feel like they've got someone who they can talk to. Seek professional help if you need it. If it's a psychologist for either you or your child or a family as a whole. I put Carers Australia on there. So good, because while we don't see our kids as carers, where Carers Australia, they have young carer programs, and they have things like holiday programs and days out where kids can go along and meet other kids in similar situations. So kids that might have a few extra responsibilities compared to kids who don't have a parent living with MS or another similar condition. And they have great resources, and they're just a really beautiful organisation. And if you haven't thought about them, really good to sort of check out what's available. Do let the school teachers and welfare officers know, just so that they can keep an eye out for any sort of changes and know how to pick up on anything that they might need to address with the kids. And if you need to, there are things like the Kids Helpline where kids can have just a confidential chat, let out a bit of a vent with someone who's trained to help them reframe sort of some of their concerns in a positive way, and that's free as well. our organisation, you know, please keep in mind that we have so much available that can help you. Because we have so much, a really great starting point is MS Connect. If you can either contact them over the phone, via email, via a live chat via the website, ask the simplest question or just go blare about what's going on. They'll have a chat to you and they can talk about, well, at this point in time, what's the most helpful way to move forward? Do you need to speak to one of the nurses or social workers for a bit more of an in-depth chat? Would you benefit from linking into our awesome peer support program, where we have trained peers who you can meet with speak with over the phone one-on-one over any particular topic, and they spend a lot of time trying to match you appropriately. So, you know, if you're concerned about a new medication that you're about to start, they'll find someone who has experience with that medication. If you are getting into those teenagers' years and your kids are driving you mad, they'll try and match you up with someone else in a similar life situation who's been there, who can provide some great advice. We also, actually, I'll talk about that in the next slide. There's a bit more. We have great education programs. Obviously, you're linked into the webinars, so you know about that. Wellness days and other face-to-face programs. I'll talk a bit more about the camps. We have an amazing employment support program. So if you're still working and you're a bit worried about it, link into our employment support. They have some great resources and advice to help you feel more confident, you know, maintaining your job, you know, especially if you are sort of balancing a family as well. And NDIS, the big NDIS word. So, you know, wherever you are on the NDIS journey, maybe you're just curious about it, maybe you're thinking of applying, maybe you're already in it. If you need some advice or support along the way, we do so much around the NDIS space. Please talk to us. So I spoke a bit about the peer support program already. I wanted to really highlight that there's a mums telegroup, and so it connects, you know, up to 10 mums over the phone to have a chat, to get information, and feel like, you know, you're speaking to other people who understand. Now, there are men's groups as well. So, you know, don't be alarmed if it's, you know, if you're a dad with MS, or your wife or your partner is living with MS but you still want the support. There are carer groups, there are men's groups, there are all sorts of telegroups that can help you. We have some fantastic, you know, family days out and camps. Really, really fun days. Great opportunities to sort of bond as a family unit yourself, but to meet other families who are just like yours. That is so powerful for the kids to see, but so powerful for you to see and talk to other mums and dads, and to realise that you're going through a lot of the same things. And if you are interested in linking in with these, you can put your names down on these family lists and you'll get invitations to upcoming events like there's a Science Works Day next week, there's camps probably later on in the year, or depending on where you live, there are camps at different times of the year. Can't encourage you to link in with these enough. They're really, really professionally run, good fun, but good information too. Just a little bit longer, I promise. We have heaps of booklets for kids. So we have ones about, you know, has your mum or dad got MS, changes in feelings, positive parents. So booklets for the kids themselves, booklets for you as parents to help talk to your kids. There are great websites now. So if that's how your kid prefers to receive their information, that might be where you want to link them into. This is a fantastic one that's simple but really great information. Talk to MS Connect. We can send you out some other resources, some more medical based if your kids are really curious, some more activity based, amazing things that other organisations have produced that we have access to. For older children, we have some information that goes into a little bit more detail. We also want to touch on
the reading. They're done.
I'm done.
What a marathon. I'd like to thank everyone who's been listening today, and I hope that you've gained some good confidence to start your own journey of conversation and continue that. And we'd really like to thank Kat for coming in today and doing that, and definitely for Sue to give up some time to come in today and provide a parent approach and a parent perspective and voice to the conversation of talking with your kids. And we look forward to you contacting us on MS Connect for any further information and support that we can provide. As Kat has said, there's a whole wealth of information and support available through our organisation. I'm just going to briefly touch on the MS Readathon, which is throughout August, and maybe something that is a iconic activity in Australia and is happening in August. And so it's a really good way for children to be involved in reading, but also to get some insight and confidence in MS as well. So you can definitely register, children can register on that link down there below. Just another quick shout out for our ebooks. We also have a library of ebooks that have a wealth of information that may be of interest to you. And again, you can contact MS Connect to get some login details and have a scroll through our free ebooks, and no library fines with that. Other things we have available is our Get Your Act Together online tool. Again, that's helpful for managing multiple sclerosis symptoms, gives a lot of good personalised advice for you. So take a look. Kat's talked about the National Disability Insurance Scheme, often shortened to NDIS, and Sue is also a support coordinator for that scheme. So very specialised in MS and able to look at how that scheme can support you and your family. We are a NDIS registered provider, and that's in New South Wales, ACT, Victoria and Tasmania. So we're able to help with a number of areas there, and you can contact MS Connect for further details. We also have a financial assistance program that you may or may not be aware of that can provide one-off funds for anyone who's with MS who is experiencing financial hardship. So if you think that may be of assistance to you, definitely get in touch with us. Also part of a research program with Anna Butler, and that's a very important research we're doing and we're involved with. So if you're interested, you've got that slide on your email, so you can contact Anna to have a conversation. Thank you very much. It's been a marathon, and I'd like to thank you all for being here today. And as I say, this will be recorded and is available on our site in another couple of weeks' time. If you have any burning questions that haven't been answered, please feel free to email us at you can do it at msconnect@ms.org.au or education@ms.org.au, and I can pass those questions on to Sue or Kat to answer on your behalf and get them back to you. Please stay on the line for a short survey at the end so that we can find out what you enjoyed about today, how we can continue to improve, and have a great day and go well.